However, we're going to look at, in a few minutes, the idea of using chemical dyes. And of course, chemical dyes, one of the things they react with most strongly in wood is tannin. And tea is just loaded with tannic acid. So it's a bit of a technique that if you do a wash on a piece of tannin-rich wood with tea, that will enhance the reaction that you're going to get with tannin anyway. Godzilla meets Ted.
Poor Godzilla.
So, let's just apply a bit of this. I'm going to just, I've got some samples on the back. Just save that one. Let this guy hit. Just to show you how the application works. And what I like to use, I mean, you can use foam brushes. They work pretty well. But these little foam blocks, they just come up on the bandsaw out of old upholstery foam. And what I'm going to do, actually, there's sort of a bad habit you can get into, and it's much more an issue with the chemical dyes, is using the actual container and going back and forth on the foam and then wiping it on the wood. And I'll talk about that a bit more when we get to that. So we've got the yellow here, and you can see how intense that goes on. Now this looks really pretty straightforward to apply, and it is on a flat surface like this. But you get it on, doing something complicated like a chair or a cabinet or something. The trick is, if you can, to maintain it wet everywhere, because if you let it dry and then get back and overlap it wet on dry, it'll double up. It'll be twice as dark there as it is anywhere else. So that gets it a bit tricky. And what you might want to think, if you're planning on using dye on a project, is maybe doing some of the work before assembly. That makes it a little easier. Pre-dyeing moldings before they get attached to a cabinet, for example, something like that. The good news with this stuff is, being water-based, you can put any kind of glue on it and it'll still stick. You just have to watch that the glue doesn't run the color. But if you keep your glue back from any edges where it might bleed out, then you should be okay.
Can you spray it?
Yes, sprays really well. Yep. NGR is actually in industry applied more by spray than by the other way. So what I'm going to do is, this is what sort of Graham had mentioned, is if we take another color, this is a Sheridan, the light Sheridan mahogany one. I'm just going to use the other end of the sponge here. And you can see that if you put it on the yellow, and then we can blot it off, or take that, and then I can take just water, as long as it still stays wet. As you know, I mean, water, especially in this climate, doesn't evaporate any too fast. And you can lighten things down. You see the amount of yellow coming off there. You want to be a bit judicious about this on a surface that you just veneered with some water-soluble glue or something, but you get the idea. So, I mean, you can lighten it, you can add other colors to it. We can go back and, so that was too much, we can push the yellow back on there. Back and forth, and just kind of fool around with the colors quite a bit. You can also mix it other ways too. So on this one, I'm just going to take some of that light Sheridan mahogany, a little bit of that, a little bit of the yellow. And of course, if you're doing this as an experiment, you'd want to make sure that you were measuring these nice and carefully. Because what if you get the most beautiful finish ever and you forgot what proportions you used? So how's this going to look compared to the other ones we've got? Sort of idea. So we talked about one of the reasons to use this is because you get these really vibrant colors, and another one is because you can make dramatic changes. You can make things really black or really blue or whatever more evenly. But another one is to use them in combination with stains. And I don't want to say that I always use dyes. Dyes are better than stains, because that's not the way I want to think of it. I want to think of what strengths each of them have. And one of the things that dyes have a great ability to do is kind of bring out a depth from behind. And where I sort of first caught onto this was in an article, not in Fine Woodworking, but Fine Home Building. It was an article called "A Furniture Grade Finish for Trim." And there's an article in here about a New York brownstone, an old building that they went into, and they stripped all the woodwork. You can see it right up against the bricks. I'll leave this out, you can have a look at it later. And then they went in and sprayed a non-grain raising dye on it. Now, how well all of you can see this, but can you just imagine if a customer came home that night and saw that their woodwork had been sprayed bright pink everywhere? They'd, what the hell have you done to my house? But then, on top of that goes a stain, and what was that vivid pink now kind of comes through from behind. So you get that lovely red. And I've got a couple of samples here. This is just on a bit of mahogany. This one is stain only, cherry colored stain. I can't remember which make. And this one is 50% diluted solution of the stuff we're just using, that light Sheridan mahogany, with early American, another again stain color on. And you can sort of see, I hope you can anyway, that a certain amount of depth that one has compared to this one. It's just a much more alive sort of sample. Yeah. So I had hoped to do that for you on these, and I thought, well, I'll put a bit of red on cherry, and then I'll put some, this is called rosewood, I think, Brazilian rosewood, Minwax gel stain, one of these guys. I would put that on cherry, and I thought, well, that was my first one. I thought, yeah, I can see a place for this. I mean, maybe, but that's pretty red, and that's kind of my fault because I didn't dilute it. That's full strength out of the mix there. So by mixing it 50-50 with water, I could have killed that down a little bit and probably not had it quite so intense. But how much more life that one has, despite it's too red, than just stain alone. That's the Brazilian rosewood alone on there. On the oak one, I thought, well, I'll really impress them. I'll do my usual yellow. I love using the lemon yellow and then putting things on top because it kind of brings out this gold from behind. And again, a kind of a failed experiment. If any of you want that sort of greeny, awful color there, you know exactly how to get it now. But again, I think if you watered or diluted the yellow down a bit, and then this was, again, the aged oak gel stain with the yellow behind it, you do get that depth there. And then another one, I got one of my students, I've got one every year, but this year, a student who had one day jet black hair, came in with her jet black hair, and we were talking about dyes, and it turned on to hair dyes, and I didn't know this, but if you want really, really black hair, you dye it blue first, and it gives that sort of life from behind. And it's interesting because all hair dyes, until very recently, were aniline based until they found that one of the best things for it because it's all coal-based materials. So now they're using more vegetable-based products. So I thought, I'm going to give that a try. So I thought, based on last month's ebonizing one, why don't I put some blue dye on some maple and then put some black over it. So this is another one of my favorite colors on top, is a type of stain. You just take whatever color paint you want, and this is Varathane Colors and Plastic. I've used Tremclad, whatever type of paint. Thin it down, maybe 50% thinner, and just wipe that on as a stain. Just wipe it on, because paint is not much different than regular stain. It's got solids in it, and it fills pores and so on. So this little area here is just the black paint only, thinned out black paint, rubbed onto the maple grain. This is it on top of the bright blue. So you can still see the blue coming through. And again, if I maybe mixed, because what I'd like to try now is mixing some blue and some ebony black dye, get just a super dark blue that way, and then try some black on top. Just see if I get that bit of blue coming out the back, just a bit more life to it than black on black maybe. So, Peter.
Yeah, you say enamel, or can you use the water-based?
Yes, you can use both. And enamel like this one, you just mix with paint thinner to thin it down. And we've used a lot of times in class here acrylics. They work really well because you can mix them with